everybody, welcome back to the Ortiz Outtakes.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back.
I hope all of y'all are caught up on our episodes, but also on Constellation on Apple TV because we sure are.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. We're gonna get into it to the best that we can without getting all crazy into like quantum physics and this, that, and the other. We'll have to mention it, but I'm not gonna go all in the weeds on that.
Not that we're like completely qualified in quantum physics, but we got a good understanding. I'll go ahead and dive in. Constellation is an Apple TV series, and it is a psychological thriller slash science fiction series. And like we just mentioned, it has to do with quantum physics and not necessarily alternate universes, but more like alternate like realities um, that are like going on at the same time. And the show does get confusing, so I do recommend a binge watch if you haven't watched it, because I cannot imagine people who are waiting for weekly episodes because I needed answers right away. Our main actress is Numi Rapace, and she is a Swedish actress, and you may know her as the actress from the A24 movie Lamb, where they had, I don't know if you saw this one, Dad, but it's like a kid with a lamb head, and it's also like psychological thriller, and it's in Swedish too, I believe. But that one is like another mom and daughter story pretty much. She's also known for her portrayal of Lisbeth Salander in the foreign version of the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo series, which that's like one of my favorite books. I have the series right here behind me. She's also known as in other projects such as What Happened to Monday, Prometheus, Alien Covenant, and much more action and sci-fi type movies. So she's definitely like a genre actress. And then like how you were saying last week on the episode that she is like a straight up, action star. So Numi plays Joanna Erickson, or Jo is what they call her. So the first episode opens up in space, and she is an astronaut aboard the ISS, the International Space Station, along with 4 other astronauts. And the first episode begins with her talking to her daughter on an iPad, checking in. But as she's having this conversation, all of a sudden they have this tragic and intense moment when the space station is hit with debris, and it causes tons of malfunctions, which eventually causes, one of the astronauts, Paul, he ends up, not live. He loses his life after they amputate his arm in space. He goes into cardiac arrest. He doesn't make it, and during all this panic, Joe's character has to do a spacewalk to assess the damage on the outside and like fix, make sure they're gonna have oxygen and life support on the ISS.
Yeah, so while she's outside doing her spacewalk, she looks at what the damage is, and it looks like that while she's looking at it to assess the damage at this big hole on the side of the ship, she sees what she thinks is a female corpse in the USSR spacesuit. So that part right there is important because she keeps on having that vision.
Due to the damage, it's basically found that the ISS, it only has enough for life support for 1 person. So 3 of the astronauts have to go home while Joe volunteers to stay behind and finish the mission of repairing the station. And also, she is tasked with bringing home like a secret side mission that NASA was working on called Cal. And we'll circle back to this shortly. While she is up in space alone in the space station is when we start seeing, okay, this show is all right, this is what's gonna be happening in this show. But while she's up in the space station alone, she's trying to make it home alive, and she has to do this repair of like taking batteries out for one side of the station and bringing it into the pod that is gonna take her home eventually. And it's gonna take a long time, and she's like running on limited amount of oxygen, so it's like super stressful task. But we begin to see slips of reality, or should I say multiple realities, or coinciding realities. She has a moment in the space station where she's floating, and then all of a sudden she turns and she's suddenly like in a hallway on Earth. And she's tripping at this point because, well, you know, at first we can think she's having like a reaction to having like low oxygen and hallucinating, but she thinks she hears somebody locked up in like a cabinet. And then she turns around and she's back on the space station. So, you know, we're just like, what the heck is going on? Like she just went to a different place. And so that's kind of what we're left questioning in this moment. Ultimately, she does end up making it back to Earth in the nick of time. It's super stressful, and yeah, you didn't tell me they were in space at first, because I would have told you space stuff stresses me out. When she's up there assessing the damage, like in the first episode, she sees this dead cosmonaut, and she, you know, the whole entire time she's talking to the people down on Earth that are like giving them instructions, and she's, you know, giving them live reporting. So she's like, I just saw a female cosmonaut, USSR. That's what caused the damage. That's what crashed into us. But the thing is that like her other partner who was out there doing the spacewalk, he was somewhere else assessing damage, so he didn't see it. So she's the only one who saw it. And
Yeah.
whenever she does make it down back to Earth, they have all these like debrief, you know, meetings about their mission. Of course, they had like an astronaut that didn't make it, and they just have to do all of these like, you know, things by the book. They have all the astronauts discussing the mission, what happened, and what they saw. And when she tells them that she saw this female cosmonaut,
It was a body, a human body.
they're basically like, oh no, that's not possible. Like, we have reports of everything. There's never been a body left ever in space. Like, it's impossible. And they were like, oh, could it have been a trash bag? And they pulled out like some old pictures of what their trash bags looked like, which were orange, you know, trash bags, just how the cosmonaut suit was orange.
It was the body of a woman wearing a USSR flight suit and helmet.
And eventually she's just like, you know, she's feeling kind of crazy, like, I know what I saw. And they're like, no, they're not accepting this answer. So she finally just gives in, and she's just like, all right, it's a trash bag, can we go home now? And they're like, oh, okay, yeah, thanks, meeting's over, you know. So we're already like, okay, why don't they, you know, believe her? Like, why aren't they accepting this answer? Later in other episodes, we see her daughter dreamed about it, and she didn't, there's no way like she could have known about this because she wasn't attending these debrief meetings. And so she draws this cosmonaut that her mom saw. So it kind of, you know, makes her feel like, okay, I'm not going crazy. Like, something's going on here.
After that, when she finally she says, well, whatever, it was a trash bag or what have you, you know, they like go to a scene in which Alice, the daughter, is outside, and I guess she's waiting for Joe to come out. Uh, but she's with her friend, and then she has the Alice is with the friend of Paul, the daughter, the daughter of Paul, the astronaut that died. And she's out there, and they're sad and what have you. So she gives the other little girl her little rabbit stuffed animal. And then later on, she's looking for the girl because they playing hide and seek, and she sees the girl in like a little she's looking from under a truck, and sees the other girl whom which she gave the rabbit to throw the rabbit down on the floor in the water and stomp it out, um,
Mm.
and then of course Alice objects, and when she comes out, the girl is not there, so it's just showing a little trippy moment right there, because then Henry comes out from the building and starts talking to Alice. And what she's talking to Alice about is, and it's strange that he's talking to the girl, but and like kind of expects like she understands, but he starts talking about what something's called like the observer effect, in which um, it was a scientific study on matter. Like I said, I wasn't going to get too heavy in physics, but the observer effect is the disturbance of a observed system by an act of observation. So I won't get too much into that because it's going to take forever. But that's what the
Yeah.
definition of
So,
that is.
yeah, and then on that note, whenever she had saw her friend like stomp on the rabbit, like she came out and she was like, "Stop!" But then there was no girl there, like how you were saying. And then she exits the
Yeah.
building, and then she sees her friend happily walking with the rabbit unharmed, and she was like, "Why'd you do that to my rabbit?" And the friend's like, "What are you talking about? Like that never happened." And on that note, it kind of goes into like what her mom Joe is going through also, like while she's back on earth. While she's back on earth, there's nonstop rehabilitation for the astronauts, and um the government pretty much, or the government or whoever they are, the space station people, they're trying to get the mom on medication, like basically putting her on lithium, saying that she lost her mind, and instead of exploring like this possibility of like what she's saying is true. But a woman named Arena is seems to be like the main person who's trying to put a cap on this. Like she's just like, take your medicine, or basically like your career is gonna be over. But throughout her whole re- rehabilitation, being back on Earth, like she ends up going back to her home, like where she actually lives and not just like in the base. So she goes to her home, and things are a bit off, especially like with her husband. He seems kind of like off put by her because she's showing him love and saying she misses him, and he was just like, "Are things okay?" And we basically get a hint that whenever she left for space, that things were not okay between them. And now that she's back, it kind of seems like she never remembered any of that. Like she always, was had a good loving relationship with her husband. And other things are off, like she's like, "Oh, we got a new car. Our old one was red." And he's like, no. Like our car has always been blue. We did not get a new car." He's like, "What the fuck?" And so
Yeah.
and then also she keeps talking to her daughter in Swedish, and she's put off whenever she realizes like her daughter doesn't understand her. Like she keeps talking to her daughter in Swedish, and then finally she's just like, "You don't understand what I'm saying," So we're just like, okay, so she thought her car was red. She thinks her daughter speaks Swedish. Like, her husband's wondering why the heck she's so being loving towards him. like what's happening.
And her
And
boss
then the
keeps
other
on and
thing,
her boss keeps on hitting her on her.
oh yeah, and then her boss keeps hitting
Uh,
on her, and she's just like, "What the heck is going on?" And then the boss is pissed. He
yeah.
was like, "I talked to HR already," and she's like, "About what, boy? Like I'm married." And then, and the other thing is, she keeps seeing glimpses of Paul, the dead astronaut, every once in a while. Like she went to go lay down flowers at his headstone, and then she looks up and he's standing there, kind of doing the same thing as she's doing, actually. And so, we also are questioning if she's losing her mind, or, is these two realities happening at the same time? So while all this is going on with Joe, Henry Caldera, who he's played by Jonathan Banks, which everybody knows he's Mike from Breaking Bad, and Henry is running tests on that side experiment, the CAL, that secret side NASA experiment. And so this is a particle that I believe is the reason why they had a collision. As soon as we saw this tech, with the particle in the first episode, and it activated, and I believe like as soon as it activated, that's why the collision happened. And so I believe it caused the collision, and this created the alternate reality that is like being lived out simultaneously. So he was basically trying to prove his theory that this is true, that two things are happening at the same time, like two realities are going on at the same time. But no one is really believing him, and it's basically a failed experiment because no one else is seeing the results that he is seeing, and they're just like not gonna fund his experiment anymore. But through that, we learn that we also viewing his alternate person. So apparently, like, he's old and he's an astronaut that had went to the moon and everything. So he experienced what Joe is going through, but he is just like older, I guess, and dealing with it better. And he's also taking that medicine that they're trying to put Joe on. He's been popping those pills every day. And we see his alternate person who goes by Bud and not Henry, and Bud is like, he's a loose cannon. He's killing. I swear he killed like two people. He's just acting up,
Yeah.
and he's a drunk.
Yeah, he killed
And like,
he killed one and almost killed the other. The other one survived, is Paul.
we can get into him because he was just like an astronaut a disgruntled astronaut who was never okay coming back from his mission. It went bad after they went to the moon, and like I said, it's not very clear, but what is clear is that Henry went through the same thing that Joe is currently going through. So we understand that there are two realities going on at the same time, and so the one that we are initially showed is the reality where Joe makes it back home. But then and Paul is died in space and he didn't make it. So the other reality, and I think you can talk about this, is we get a whole episode from Paul's perspective, except in this episode he lives and Joe stays in space. Like she doesn't make it. And so she's dead in the other reality, and Paul is alive. So do you want to talk about that episode for a little bit?
It's titled Paul is Dead. So they, in the other universe, the ISS is hit by debris and Joe is killed. So Paul is the astronaut instead of Joe that's left behind. It's kind of almost like the first one, in which he's, his whole team is gone, and it's him and Joe. Joe's the one that's dead, and he starts, of course, hallucinating with Joe's corpse. but he had to make the decision whether or not to leave her behind or bring her home. So he did make the decision to leave her behind on the space station and come back home to the Earth.
Mm-hmm.
So almost the same thing happens to him as far as him having visions that and having visions like Joe was having of him at the cemetery and what have you. And then also, he's being questioned by the space agency as to why he made the decision to leave Joe behind. He's like disturbed by the differences between his memories and the world that he's actually, that he lives or that he's in. His family, is like bugging out on him too because like he starts bugging out with them. Um,
Yeah.
at one point, he starts of noticing all of these differences, and he starts putting things together. So he goes to find Henry Caldera. So Henry Caldera was like what Melanie explained. He was in charge of that program or that experiment in space. So they had a close connection because they were both from also NASA. Paul goes looking for him and he finds him, um, through his investigative efforts. He finds him in an apartment somewhere. It was in California, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Los Angeles.
so yeah, he finds him. So when he opens he knocks on Henry's door, and the one that answers is not Henry, it's Bud, and but Paul doesn't know that because it looks like the same guy. So he gets
Mm-hmm.
in and Bud, they try to explain. Well, he tries to explain to Bud, what he's going through and what have you, and Bud is like steady, like, nope, that's not me. You got the wrong person, and winds up shooting him uh, for what we think.
In the
I mean,
stomach.
he shot him in the stomach, but they didn't show whether or not he was dead or not. But that was kind of
Yeah.
like how that episode concluded, and then it moved on to the other uh, to the next episode, episode 7. But
Yeah. Another chaotic episode.
yeah, the husband starts asking questions. The husband's name is Magnus, as to why, I guess, why she has been like tripping. They got into a fight, and then she pushed him, and he fell, hit his head.
So before that happened, he had asked her, like, you don't remember how things were, when you left? And he was like, be honest, like, you and her boss or something,
Frederick.
saying that they had an affair. Yeah. And she was like, no, like, I swear, like, I never did that. And he was like, okay, fine. But then Frederick comes over and he's just like, tells the husband, that they are having an affair, that they were gonna go
Yeah.
run away together. Not run away, but they were gonna be stationed somewhere else together. Like they were actually together. Like he said, he talked to
Yeah.
HR about it and stuff like that. So the husband was like, "You lied to me. You told me you didn't have an affair." And she was like, "I swear that never happened." Like, and then she was like, "I don't remember. I don't remember." And so then that's why they're gonna fight. She pushed him and he hit his head. And
Right.
after they got into the fight, she's like in her kitchen and she gets mad and knocks over a bunch of stuff off the table, and then she sees a package that has tapes in it. So she
Yeah.
puts in those tapes and she hears herself from the space station from when nobody can hear her up there. And so she takes her daughter and then they go on this road trip and then they go visit these people who sent her these tapes.
But she has the thing, doesn't she? The cow.
Yeah, and then she
Remember,
took
she
that
took
too.
it. Yeah.
She took it from
From the
she started
lab.
doing her own research. Yeah, because she
Yeah.
found out that the vitamins that they were giving her were actually lithium, And so
Yeah.
she started sneaking into the lab and doing some research, like seeing if other astronauts were getting it, if it was just her, like who else was getting it. So she found out that Henry was actually taking it, and Irina too.
Yeah.
Um, and so she's tripping. She's like, they're drugging me, pretty much. So she takes that experiment and she takes her daughter, and they set out on the road, and they go visit those people who made those tapes. Whenever she goes to that observatory, they reveal to her that they have recordings of astronauts in the space station, of them being reported as dead, but then, then they come back to Earth alive, so they have all this proof that
Yeah.
people are dying in space but coming back alive. And that's when we discover that maybe she got sent back to the wrong reality, which is why
Yeah.
her car is not red, which is why her daughter doesn't seem like her daughter, and which is
Yeah.
why, like, for some reason in this reality she had an affair, when her other one she was like in love with her husband and would never do that. That's why everything is off, because they sent her back to the wrong reality. And I think that it was supposed to be Paul's reality, and she was supposed to go back to where Paul is. So Paul's living a
Yeah.
nightmare, she's living a nightmare, and they're both trying to figure it out. So that episode is crazy, because while she's out in the cabin with her Alice, but it's not her Alice, it's like, the wrong reality Alice, she, like, the veil is thin there, because her Alice is looking for her in the snowstorm, and they do eventually find each other, but they can't stay together because that's just not how it works. Like, she's stuck on this in this reality, and she can't go to the other one. Like, she's dead in the other one. She basically kind of kidnapped her daughter, so her husband and a team is looking for her, and Henry is a part of that team. So Henry sees the cabin, it ended up setting on fire, and when he is approaching the cabin, he starts whenever he gets closer to the Cal, like, tech, because she had it, he starts tripping, and he starts, like, like, seeing Bud's reality of shooting Paul. And that is when I think that right there, they switched realities, because
Yeah.
by the end of it all, we come to an understanding that the Henry that we know, who, like, kind of has a thing going on with Irina, is like, Bud and Henry ended up switching places. So then we see Henry going down for the shooting and Paul, and the murder of a person on the ship, and then we see Bud sitting down for a dinner with Irina, being his Bud self, and he's just like, this is weird, because I remember an Irina who died in space, and she's like, have you been taking your pills? She's the pill pusher.
Yeah.
A lot of this is in the final episode, but eventually Joe gets taken to, like, a mental facility where they end up doing, like, shock treatment on her, and they're trying to get her back to normal. But she's, like, telling them, like, no, I'm not schizophrenic, I'm not crazy, like, I am seeing these things, like, I heard these tapes, like, that that I died. Like, she learns on one of the tapes that she died. I think the thing that got her was her colleague Ilya came and checked on her, but he kind of was, like, not really helpful. Like, he was just like, you just need to take your medicine, and, like, just saying the same shit to her. But then he slipped her some keys secretly so she can sneak out. So whenever she does use the keys, she goes and checks this other patient that she hears that's been screaming. And when she looks through, like, their door or whatever, she sees an old man, and then she sees, like, it looks like a twin old man, but she sees two of the same old man and they're crazy, like yelling and stuff. So whenever she asked Arena about the other patient, she was like, how are the men, like, what happened to the men upstairs, to those two men upstairs? And Arena's like, that's just one man. And so this is when they finally have like an actual real conversation, like honest conversation. She's like, that's just one man. And then Joe's just like, am I ever like gonna make it back to my own reality? Or like, she says something like that, and Arena's like, no, like this is just like, you just have to learn how to live with it. But also, the bombshell is that she's pregnant. I don't know if you caught this, but did you see the ultrasound picture?
Yeah, it looked like that experiment.
Yeah, so the ultrasound image looked like the image that the cow was putting out. It was definitely her husband's baby because it was only 4 weeks old.
It could have been an alien.
I know, right? It's the cow. It's cows.
Hey, that'll even make it more confusing.
I know, right? Because we're already struggling here. No, but yeah, that kind of made her chill and kind of accept, what is happening to her, and or what has happened to her. So we kind of see her be at peace with that. But at the same time, on the last episode, we're left knowing that Bud and Henry switch realities. Henry's in deep shit because he's getting arrested for murder. Who knows what Bud is gonna do because
Paul is in the hospital.
Yeah, and then Paul wakes up in the hospital, and
because he lived because of the gunshot. He lived.
Yes, he lived after getting shot, but like we just know he's been going through the same thing that Joe has, but he hasn't gotten as far as Joe in her, like, finding the answer. So he's still stuck in the nightmare, pretty much. Arena, the one who is so, like, in charge of making sure that they don't get out of hand and taking their medicine and stuff like that, we learn that she was the dead cosmonaut that Joe did see in the beginning. She ends up admitting that to Alice at the end of the series, and like kind of like in a cheeky way. So she also has firsthand experience in what Joe's going through. And then the final scene.
Yeah, the final scene was when they showed her smashed face. Half of her face was gone, and she was looking at the iPad in the space station.
Yes. And I feel like it was like a good classic horror style ending because we see the alternate dead Joe still in the space station, and her body is floating and turning in zero gravity, revealing the damage on her face, which half of her face is like gone. Like, it's like gone. Like, there's no way she can function. But anyways, we see all the damage that's been done to her face, like piece of her face literally gone. But as she floats and turns towards the camera, her iPad that she was using in the beginning to talk to Alice is floating, and then she freaking grabs the iPad and opens her eye, and then they end the show. It's just like boom, and we're like, what the fuck? Like, what's gonna happen? Because I thought this was a limited series.
It looks like they left it open for a second season. I hope that it does come, back for a second season, because they need to clarify some stuff for me,
If they were to do a second season, what do you think will happen?
So, I mean, I think if they were to do a second season, they definitely need to start off with Henry Caldera's experience, what his story was, And I think that intertwined with that will be the arena story as well, because they should probably put that in there as well, because that'll be an interesting story. You know what I mean? Um,
Yeah. So
maybe
yeah,
Paul, but
definitely
I'm not.
because well, Paul is
Yeah,
gonna be a big one.
yeah, they need to close that story out. So they left a lot to do as far as like a season two. You know what I mean? Hopefully, it's not as confusing within the episodes that we were watching, and they were talking about the actual what the cow actually does. There was two explanations. I don't know if you hit on that. You know what I'm saying before, but yeah, there was
What the
one.
heck? That's your computer.
Yo, I'm not even touching the computer, and then balloons is coming out and shit. There's two explanations of the cow uh, within a couple of shows. So I have to look to see what actually was the second one. But the first one was they when they were explaining what the experiment was, it was dealing with discovering a new type of matter in zero gravity. So that was the explanation for that. But then later on, they start talking about it again, and they said a total different uh, explanation as to what the cow was. You know, I just have to look that to see what that
Yeah.
was. If, but
So
I know
that's
that they need to explain it again.
it.
Yo, what's all them damn balloons and shit?
I know one thing is that they need to explain it again. But what they need to do is like put a block in so they don't be coming in and out of each other's reality.
Joe, she was already. She was like, "Well, I'm gonna have to live in this reality." You know, she like kind of gave up. But
And I
maybe
think a
in the
lot of that
second
has to do
season.
is that she's pregnant now.
Oh yeah, and that's crazy right there. So I thought it was good. Well, I just needed to just trying to like, and you see how we still going through theories and stuff. So, it kind of made you think. It kind of made you think.
But yeah, really, Alice is like, even though she's a kid, she's really one of the only people who really figures out
She was
what's
the one
going
that,
on.
yeah, she was the one that figured it out. I
She's
mean,
the
to tell you
only
the
one who
truth,
like
she was,
figures it out
yeah,
and like
yeah,
understood it too.
yeah.
And
At first, I thought she was annoying and shit, but she wound up being a good character.
you know what? I did too. I was like, damn, was she acting up like her mom obviously went through some trauma? Like she was up in space
Yeah,
alone and she's just like, you're not acting like my mom. And this whole time I was like, oh my God. Because sometimes
yeah,
kids do be pissing me off in shows, like acting like,
yeah.
mean
I'm
and
like,
like.
cause I was like, nah, this little girl's gonna be a pain in the fucking ass, man. But, but she wound up being a good character.
She's the person who really figures it all out. And again, with the Alice in Wonderland theme, she's truly goes through the rabbit hole like with her mom. And so even though that's not Alice's world mom and that's not Joe's Alice, Joe and Alice end up still having each other and they actually really need each other. And they kind of come to an agreement and terms with like, okay, well, you know,
This is what it is.
we're this is what it is, and they're just happy to have a mom, and Joe is just happy to have an Alice.
I followed it. There was no problem. I understood everything. But when it came to like the last two episodes, you really had to pay attention, because that's when it started. They started to try to actually close a lot of all of these loops in the last two episodes.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a lot of things going on and things being said that you had to kind of keep track on, you know. But all in all, I thought it was a decent
Yes.
show.
I hope they do at least one more season, but after that, I don't think they can keep doing it. I think one more season.
Yeah, I think they need to close
and
it
that's
out
it.
with just one more.
Again, we end up in the quantum physics world. I think we like to be confused a little bit.
Well, you know, and that was the thing when I saw this. To me, I was like, "Oh, brother, another multi-universe thing," you know. But this one, it was
Oh,
more
brother!
so. Oh, brother, this guy sucks. Um,
That was
but,
us to Alice.
But I think in the way that they did it, it wasn't more like, you know, the MCU type of multiverse thing. It was more of like a parallel realities. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it was more interesting that way. You know,
Out of 10, I'll give it like 7.5.
7.5. Yeah, I'll give it a 7. Yeah,
A 7.
that sounds about
So like
only because
the,
I got. Yeah, this is,
this is
a
10.
7 is like, yeah, this
So
is
like
10.
here.
Hey, why did that come up? So 7 is like this. So the only reason that it gets this, like this, that movie, Constellation, is because
Mhm.
I was simultaneously watching what was the name of the power,
The three
what?
body problem.
The three body problem.
Body
So
problem.
I was, yeah, 3 body problems and shit. So, so I was getting mind fucked by 2 shows, cause that other one is a fucking mind fuck too.
All right, y'all. So that is our episode on Constellation. We hope we kind of clarified anything that maybe y'all were confused about, but also it's just nice to just talk it out sometimes. But next week we will be talking about Dune or Dune 2 specifically. So if you haven't seen Dune 2, go watch it. And I'm gonna go watch it in IMAX right now after this. So don't forget to like and subscribe and share our channel to all your friends. And you know, maybe you don't always have to be watching the things that we are talking about, but you know, it's just nice to have conversations going in your ears sometimes. So like and subscribe, and we'll come back to you next week.
Like and subscribe, guys, and make sure you comment.
Oh my god. All right, bye guys.
Okay, deuces out.